Hello, everyone. We'll get started in a second. Just want to make sure everyone has a second to join us. And if you are here to learn about becoming a hybrid technical UX writer, you are in the right spot. So we will get started. Cool. So as always, we will be recording this convo so you can watch it again and again if you feel so inclined. And if you have any questions as we go along, drop them in the Q&A or the chat function, and we will do our best to answer those at the end. We comb through all of the questions you submitted in the registration form, so we'll take a look at those too. And then after, we will send you guys an email recap. So yeah, feel free to just follow along and hopefully learn something new today. So today we will be covering a quick intro to our new course, UX Writing for Technical Writers. And then Dave will be sharing a little bit more on his background as a hybrid writer and what that means and what that looks like and how to get there. So excited to share that with y'all. And then we will cover FAQs and again, save some time for a Q&A at the end. So with that, we will get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you. This chat is lit. And we're so excited you're here. Cool. So Dave is with us today. Dave is a new course author for UX Writers Collective, UX Writing for Technical Writers. And he is a senior documentation and UX writer, as well as a children's book author, which he is a word lover, as you can tell, in its many forms. And then we have Patrick here, co-founder and CEO of UX Writers Collective, former lead digital copywriter at MYOB, and host of Writers of Silicon Valley podcast. So with that, we will get started. And we will pass it over to Patrick, who will walk you through our new course.
Yeah, thanks so much, Katie. So happy to see everyone here. Welcome from, it looks like every country on earth almost. So it's so exciting to have so many people here. Yeah, I just want to give you just a quick overview of the new course, and we'll get to Dave in a second, and he'll go into some more detail here. I want to start off by talking about, why we created this course, because for us at the UX Writers Collective, whenever we create a course, it's not because we think that, it's not from our minds specifically. It's not like we say, we're just making up something that we think people want to hear. It's a response to something that's in the community. And we've heard a lot of feedback from technical writers and who do an amazing work. They're already doing a lot of work in developing user-centered documentation, but a lot of the time they don't have training in user experience. So even though they have some really significant product knowledge, that user experience gap is still there. And unfortunately, sometimes that means that documentation and technical UX writing deliverables aren't infused with that UX thinking that is really important and growing in more importance as part of technical writers' role. So if we can go to the next, so technical writers are already creating experiences that at a fundamental level are some of the deepest interaction that a user has with a product and brand. I mean, if you think about the number of times that you've had to look up documentation about a particular product or feature, that is where you are having either a really wonderful user experience or, quite frankly, potentially a horrible one. And you can see the two examples that we've provided here. If you have irritating UX within your documentation, that's a really negative experience. Whereas if you have intuitive, helpful UX that's structured right, and there's an information hierarchy that makes sense, it creates a really positive brand experience. So technical UX writers are really responsible for some of those most important interactions. And so the feedback we've received is that, we tech writers would really love more of that training. And as you can see here, technical writers and UX writers have so much in common when it comes to the decisions they're making about content. And I just encourage you to have a look at some of the examples we've provided here, because as you can see, they're both responsible for a number of deliverables. But in many instances, technical writers don't have the UX training that UX writers do. So the purpose of the course is to give technical writers a grounding in UX writing about how to not only understand the UX process, but how to apply proven design and UX principles to what you're doing already, to create and test UX deliverables in documentation, but also to go beyond tech documentation to master UI components, how to integrate design steps into your workflows, and to advocate for a better user and brand experience across all touch points, including documentation. So that's really why we created the course. And when you join the course, you don't just get the material and the training we provide. You get feedback from UX writers who are working on your course homework and finals. So your work is graded by actual working UX writers who are in the field. So we have working experts who are looking at your work. Where you have a portfolio project at the very end. So whenever we create a course, we always think, what can you take away? What can you put in your portfolio? You will complete a final project in Figma that showcases the skills you've learned throughout the course. Once you finish, we'll provide you with a certification, and that certification shows that you have completed the skills and you've shown proficiency in the skills, and we think you are ready. And of course, we have a huge community of students in our Facebook and Slack groups. So you can join, you can meet other writers, you can talk to them about the course, but also anything at all, really. Any opportunities in the industry or examples that you see that come to mind. So there's just huge opportunities to network. And so that's what the course provides. And it's available now. But I think what this webinar can really provide everyone is basically a look into not only why you should become a hybrid technical and UX writer, but also how to do that. So we want to actually give people today some actionable steps that you can take and start implementing in your work straight away. And that's why we have Dave here. So Dave, super excited that you're with us and that you're joining us today. So I'm just going to hand it over to you. And yeah, super excited to hear what you have to say.
Sweet. Thanks, Patrick. Hi, everybody. I am Dave Connis. I'm a senior documentation and UX writer at Contest Security. And we are a cybersecurity startup where we basically have a suite of tools that tell you whether or not your code sucks and you can fix it. We do more than that, but when my mom asks me, what do I do? That's what I tell her. So that's, it typically works. So I'll go over really quickly kind of how I started in technical writing and just writing in general. I've had as this says, a very squiggly career. I got into technical writing and UX on accident. I didn't go to Stanford. I'm not a ridiculously smart person. I was actually homeschooled.
False. Yes, you are.
And I skipped 8th grade because my mom ordered the wrong books. So there's a nice little fun tidbit of knowledge for you. But I really loved writing. And then shout out to homeschoolers. Yes, we do turn out normally sometimes, don't we? So I really love the writing side, and then sometimes, thanks, Ingrid. I really love the writing side of things, but I didn't really know, like nobody in my immediate sphere was super technical, so I didn't really know technical writing was a thing. And then I went to college and I majored in something completely different that has nothing to do with technology, and graduated and started off as a freelance writer. There wasn't tons of work because I graduated in 2011 and we were just coming out of the recession, and I was like, well, I need to eat food, so I need to do something. So I started off doing freelance writing. And a lot of the work that I got, I mean, it was marketing, it was blogs, it was all sorts of stuff. So I did everything, every sort of writing. And I started finding more and more of the technical stuff of writing for SaaS companies. And I really enjoyed the challenge of of writing specifically for products and writing for clarity. And I was on Upwork when a startup messaged me. It was two guys, and they were like, hey, why don't you come be a community manager for developers? We need somebody who can speak the language and who's really good at writing. And I said yes, and I was basically a project manager for developers for a while. And that project managing kind of turned into a stint of being a UX front end dev. But in that time, I was doing user interviews and a lot of user research and working in Sketch. And I loved it. It was just like such a huge part of when the days that I got to do that, I would be like, oh man, this is awesome. I want to know how to do more of that. I ended up taking a job as a technical writer for a little startup in Chattanooga called Squid. I actually think there's some Squiddies here. Josh Cutler, hey. So I ended up taking a job as a technical writer there, and really, really fast figured out that there was a huge opportunity to make the text in the app more cohesive. And at the time, this was early 2017. So this was right around when, UX writing has been around for a while, right? Like, I'm not saying that it was brand new, but it was right when terms started kind of floating around of UX writing. And it was a technical product. It was a low code. Okay. It was a low code product. And I just saw some pretty huge opportunity to work with the UX writing. And as UX writing started to become a thing and more talked about, I just kept learning. And found myself really enjoying the technical side of UX writing. And that was often held hands with the technical writing side because I was still doing the technical documentation. So, and then, moved to Contrast Security now, where I'm building out the UX writing program there. So completely by accident, but it's been great. I love it. So why should you have a squiggly career? I'm just kidding. Why should you become a hybrid tech and UX writer? So we'll start with the ROI, right? There's lots of really cool reasons, but ROI speaks to most people, speaks to businesses. We all can, I'm sure as all Word people, we all know that like a better tech docs creates a better experience for your customers, like flat out. Like there's no arguing with that, right? Like if you have random tech docs that aren't super cohesive and there's a lot of gaps, that's just gonna provide a lot of friction. Thanks, Josh. That's going to provide a lot of friction to the user's experience going from accomplishing their goals. So when you get to bring the UX principles into your technical documentation, UX was founded out of how do we make this as frictionless as possible? So combining those two things, it's a win-win. You're winning, you're winning for your business and you're winning for your user. Mm-hmm. Bringing technical clarity to UX creates a better experience. So like for UX, being able to bringing your expertise as a technical writer, because you're interviewing SMEs, subject matter experts, you have a wide view of the product. We'll talk about that later. You get to bring that to the UX, and you get to bring that to in the app and be able to kind of flex your muscles and your knowledge. And that creates a better experience in the application itself. And both of those things can differentiate your company with great copy, with a great experience in the app and out of it. So, quick a quick summary. And in the course, we give a lot of shout outs to Stripe Docs because they have a great product. They have a great documentation as a product, and they go above and beyond just what it looks like to have a user experience within documentation. So this is kind of what I was just talking about. This idea that as a technical writer, you have a very unique experience and very unique set of skills at a company. It stems from the fact that you're writing for the user, right? Like you're uniquely, this says here, you're uniquely positioned as user advocates who see across all product teams. So you're on, it depends on the structure of a team, but most technical writers I know are looking across all teams, are experiencing how people talk about the product across different teams. They're experiencing different workflows. You're experiencing different pain points across the board, and seeing a bunch of different places where customers are running into friction in the product. Combine that with the fact that over time, like I was just saying, you've talked with SMEs, you've talked with the engineers, you've talked with product marketing, you've talked with sales. You get really familiar with how the company talks about the product and the product itself. And then you get to see both the sins and the strengths across those teams, right? And that can give you unique insights in solving company conflicts and product problems. And all of these things give you a really unique view into how you can address the user experience from a content perspective. Not only can you bring that knowledge to the UX, working in like a UX point of view and with UX designers and with UX teams, but you can also bring that leadership, and I'll mention this later, to all of these other different places. Like technical writers are really smart people, and I don't think it's talked about enough how unique of a skill set and how unique of kind of like almost like a consultancy model, like that sets technical writers up to be heavy hitters when it comes to user experience.
Awesome.
Yep. And then another reason is just personal growth. Like you get to, so I use the term a full stack writer. And I use that kind of synonymous with the idea of, you have a full stack developer who can look at the front end and look at the back end and know what they need to do. Or if, they're dangerous enough to break things in both places and learn how to fix it, know what to Google, right? As a full stack writer, so for me, I started, in marketing. So I wrote marketing, I wrote blogs, I wrote all of those things. And then I kind of wound up in technical documentation and then in UX writing. And that journey for me has led me to be able to empathize with the user anywhere. That in fact impacts how I write. So maintaining a broad skill set, that kind of broad skill set, helps you keep that, a competitive industry edge, but it also just helps keeps you kind of on your toes, looking at any place where content is made and saying like, how can we better serve the user here? And that has a lot to do with like what we talk about with content strategy. But that's a part of the writer stack too, right? Is like this idea of content strategy and content design. And in that, I think we're still so early in this kind of holistic view of content that there aren't tons of places, I mean, unless you're Google or unless you're some of these bigger places, and we're seeing the growth of UX writing across the board right now. There's still, I mean, for the most part, any mid-sized company and down, they're not probably considering the impact of fractured messaging, voice, tone, taxonomy as it relates to the product and as it relates across teams. So there's a huge opportunity to lead there, and gaining UX knowledge and learning, how can we best serve the users across content? Like that's a lot of leadership. And I really think that that's going to be really important. Go ahead,
Dave,
Patrick.
I was just going to say that's fantastic. We have a great question here. And the question is it industry standard to be a specialized generalist as a technical UX writer? From this person's experience, organizations want one or the other, but not a combined role. Technical writing seen as a support role, UX writing is seen in design.
Mm-hmm.
So is it the industry standard to to be a hybrid, or one or the other?
Sure.
I think what you would say is that it's not standard, but it should be, right?
So I would say, no, it is not industry standard. My role is very strange. So like, I would say, because I am both right now, right? Like, I would say it's not industry standard, but regardless of title, I would say that technical writers should have the experience of knowing the UX, like what are the best practices for content, and how can we bring UX principles into technical writing. And on the other side, for UX writers, being able to look at the technical side of things and be able to understand what does it look like for dynamic text. Like how can we inject code into the app? Like, do we need code samples in the app? Like that sort of thing. Like, I think, no, it's not industry standard, but both titles, regardless of what your title is, there's knowledge to be had there that can make you better at that job. So I would say, with this course, I think for me, like that, yeah, like knowing best practices on both sides, bringing technical writing into the UX side, and bringing content best practices into the technical writing side. Like I think it's just a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. And to further answer that question, which was, does the course dive into advocating for technical UX writers in an org structure? The short answer is yes. We give a lot of examples of exercises that you can undertake within an organization to help advocate for that role, and some practical things you can do.
Yep.
Awesome. Cool. And with that, I feel like that's a good segue into like, how do you make that step to become said hybrid unicorn in your organization?
Yes. Okay. So this is probably gonna be a little bit of whiplash, but and again, I'm gonna speak from the technical writing side here a little bit more. But one of the things is get involved in voice and tone in your docs, right? Like I think a lot of times when we think about voice and tone, it's really easy to think about, well, docs don't have a voice and tone. We don't use humor, so there's no voice and tone. But like there's a lot more to tone than that, right? Like, so knowing in docs, like what is the right content to show the right user at the right time, like that's still important in docs, and that has a lot of overlap with the UX side, the UX writing side. It might be the like the case that like the message that's in docs is the message that needs to be in the app. So knowing what that looks like on a map, like, what is the user need? What is the right content, and how do we get it to them? Mm-hmm. And then thinking about documentation like a friend. So I started off saying like what my company does in a way that my mom can understand, right? So like documentation, regardless of how technical it should be or it is, should always strive to be as human as possible. Just because we can use the big words, because we've got the 11th grade, UX writing kind of shoots for the 8th to 9th grade level. The technical writing, Norman Nelson group, if you're familiar with them, typically say is around the 11th grade level. Just because it's around the 11th grade level doesn't mean we should use the 11th grade level words. If there's 8th grade level words, use it, because we are explaining and guiding in an empathetic, human-centered way. That's still important in documentation. And then understanding how tone impacts docs. Like this is a kind of a framework that I use sometimes just to understand, like even in the different types of reference materials and assets that a technical writer might be using, there's still a continuum, right? Like your learning tutorials and conceptual guides, there's going to be a little bit more for casual, for being casual. There's more space there. You can be a little bit more personable. You can have a little bit more space for jokes. Whether that's appropriate or not is completely contextual, but like that's an option there. Whereas formal, like API reference, no one wants jokes in an API reference. No one wants a casual personality in an API reference, right? Like that's like to the book straight. Configuration docs, same deal, because there's something at stake, right? Like if the configuration, like if you're not explaining your configuration right, then the user's going to fail. So like it has to be clear.
Yeah. And
then
Dave, just to add to that, one of the comments is like, you can be casual without jokes. And I think that's what we see with the Stripe documentation, that it still has a personality, and it still feels premium, but approachable, right? So it doesn't always have to be for comedic relief.
Right. Yes, exactly. I think a lot of times it's like caught up in the comedic relief side.
Yeah.
I've read a lot of articles. It's like, can we use jokes in documentation? And that's like tone, basically. So that's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up. Hop in the discovery and research. You know, I've heard that the difference between, and this is a good difference, the difference between UX writing and technical writing is that UX writing is on the design side. Technical writing is kind of like toward the end of the design phase, where there's a proof of concept and you have to write about it. There are, you know, wherever you fall on that, there are still really good things to be gained out of being as close to the design side as possible. And that's, I mean, just the same sort of things that UX writers are looking for. That's how are people talking about your product? Why are people, you know, what were the problems that people were running into, and how can that affect your documentation? What are you going to write about that covers those things? So get as close to that design process as possible. Work with product managers or owners and UX designers to figure out what meetings you need to attend. You know, we're all kind of meetinged already, but like there are some meetings that are really helpful to go to, where you hear about the things that are coming up the pipeline, where you can say, I'll hop in there. I can word things, I promise. And if there isn't a, you know, already a process for that, it's a matter of showing value, right? Like, and if you're a word person, you can show value, right? That's your whole job, is providing value through your skill of words. So be confident in that, and just say, hey, look, tag me in. Like, I'd love to help you with words there. And then, you know, include documentation and testing. That's a whole, there's a lot of conversation around that, but, and I'm sure we could even have a whole webinar on how to do that, but there's a lot of ways. And even if it's just guerrilla testing internally, is a great place to start.
Yeah, Dave, just to add something there, I think, you know, so much benefit can come from technical writers joining those sessions so early on, because even if they don't add any tasks or contribute to the testing or monitor or, you know, host the testing themselves, you'll still be gathering a lot of information on how customers and users talk.
Yes.
Which will influence what you do. So even by doing nothing at all, even just by watching, you're just more aware. And when it comes to attending those sessions, you know, you don't necessarily have to show your hand straight away, because, you know, depending on who's running the testing, they may be somewhat cagey about people coming in. You don't have to go like, oh, and we should ask the user this or this or this. All you need to do is just sit and watch, and you'll probably get a benefit from just doing that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that, Patrick. There's a huge benefit. I mean, one of my rules for starting a new job is just not saying anything for the first like 6 months, because like it's that exact principle, right? Like there's so much to be gleaned by listening, and it's the process of discovery. Like as UX professionals, we're really here to embrace the process of discovery and not knowing. So being able to bring that even to like your internal processes and what it looks like to learn how to best support each team like that's a huge benefit. So yeah, so we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but this is something I also use frequently. Is just an idea of the content life cycle. And a lot of times, you know, this goes back to the idea of technical writing. It's kind of brought in towards the end of the discovery and the research phase. Aim to hit that discovery and research phase, and you know, in practical ways, this might just look like tagging a UX designer and say, hey, can I read your research that came out of these meetings? It might not be like, hey, can I just tag along, which is also great. But it might just be, you know, being a benefit, like benefiting from the research that's already been done. And we're using that to kind of make it some assets to help you, you know, design and write.
Yep.
Another good thing is using task analysis. So one thing that really helps me when I'm trying to discover, like, how do I best write documentation to support a user, is just writing out what they need to do in order to get the job done. Like, what is their goal? And then writing that out, making a map. And then you find there's another kind of counterpart to this, but being able to just see each stage, it makes it a lot clearer for you to know how to be empathetic and know how to write to that user journey.
Yep.
Another thing is just like, task analysis. Sorry, I know there's tons of really good questions and it's killing me that I can't get to them. Is writing out just like a usability test plan. Like it's really easy to jump in and like, let's do all the things, but being able to say like, what's being tested? What do we want to learn out of this test? What do we need to do to like actually accomplish the test? Like this is really good for if you're working with other teams to figure out like, hey, who's responsible for what? What do we want to come to? This graphic, I'm pretty sure Patrick is in the course. So this is something that you can take from that.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Yep. So. Ooh, and this is my jam. So I could talk a lot about info hierarchy. It's one of the biggest things that I see in technical documentation is a lot of times and I say this lovingly as somebody who's also done this, but technical writers have typically been just given the directive, write the thing and support our customers through this thing. That's kind of started with like the big user manuals, and as tech has evolved, it's gotten, you know, split into chunks, and now we have these big sort of indexes of help for documentation centers and help centers. You know, as consumer tech has changed, so have docs. So we've got this the container that docs live in, that kind of has gone unconsidered. And this isn't true across the board, but just from a general standpoint, it's gone unconsidered. And that's the format, that's the structure, that's the TOC, and it's all about the style, right? So we want to think about that. Like, it's not just thinking about the words, but it's thinking about the design. How are we presenting these things? And how do we make sure that we're both focusing on the words, making sure that those things are the right words to be saying, that it supports the user. But how are we thinking about the visual hierarchy, which is the relationship between the different elements or components that make out the layout of the design? So this is a really good, if you go to the next one, this is exactly what I mean, right? Like if you go to a doc, a lot of times you'll see, and this is at nobody's fault, but you'll see just different font styles, different weights. A lot of it's just, it depends on headers and who's been involved with kind of the doc ops side of things, what your CMS is, if you're using a CMS, what you're limited to. But a lot of times you'll just see like a lot of different font styles. And this is what I mean by thinking through the visual hierarchy. You're not just reading the content, you're reading the design, right? There's tons of work about that from Nelson Norman Group about scannability. There's lots of smarter people than me that have dove into this. But this is one of the things that uniquely haunts technical documentation is your visual hierarchy, how things are laid out on a page. And how the font weights of TOCs, and if something is bolded within the documentation itself, how that correlates to maybe your H1. That considering that is low-hanging fruit and is a really good way to kind of do a quick visual audit of your docs.
Great. Yep,
here's a good example. Thinking through, like, when you look at this docs page, what do you see? You see, this header right here. You see your eye is drawn to this really thick, dark spot in your TOC. And it's almost so distracting that you kind of have to like read the text like this to make sure that you're not continually being drawn over that. And this is a lot of text. It's not incredibly scannable, but being able to consider these sorts of things, and that's kind of what bringing in the UX principles. It kind of gives you a tool set to think through, like visual hierarchy, and it gives you a tool set to think through, how do my UI components kind of fit into this thing too. So that's one of the other big benefits of this course, is that like you get to start thinking through, not just the content, but how do we lay out that content? How do we figure out what the best approach is to laying out that content? So
yeah, I mean, this example is new to me, but even just looking over like notebook examples, capital E, then lowercase, what to do when things go wrong. Like the inconsistencies in the writing just kind of cheapens the experience too.
And what does it mean? What does it mean that there was a plus sign on one, but then you get below that light gray and you get into the dark gray, and then suddenly there's no plus signs? Does that mean that those aren't folders? Those are the kinds of questions that are really fun to ask, that you end up with kind of style wise. And this is another example, right? Like this has got some strengths and some weaknesses. And one of those things that strikes me here when you're thinking about visual hierarchy is that you've got tons of different colors kind of competing for your attention. And of course your editor is one of the first things you look at, because as a whole component, you're looking at it and you see this dark spot on your screen. But without the context of your documentation, that editor isn't going to make any sense, right? And then you get into the tooltip. We have a whole section on tips and callouts and how to best optimize those for usability. But you get into this tooltip and you see replace capital US with your country code. That bold is almost bold. It's even bolder than the selected state, right? So there's like kind of ways that your bolded text kind of might conflict with the other parts of your documentation. And then, just the fact that we're not really giving tons of context in this call out. We're just giving information. And I found in a lot of my work that being able to give the user context of what they're going to expect in a call out gives them the ability to say, oh, I don't need to read that. And it saves them time and it reduces friction. All right, what can you do right now? So, yeah, there's, we say all this, but then we go back to real life where there's like two people on a team. If you're working in a smaller company, right, there's two people on a team. You're trying to keep up with the release cycle. There's thousands of fires that you have to put out because people are like, I'm going to write this guide. And you're like, but style guide. So there's all these things that are going on, right? So what are the quick ways that you can hop in? We've gone over some, but just like kind of to reiterate, like research, just try to make best friends with your UX designers if they're there, if you have any, or your product designers or your PMs, whoever's touching, and if none of them or all of them, customer support. Customer support is constantly talking to customers, and they're a great source of pain points. And I'm sure that they typically want to rant about the things that they constantly hear about that you can support them on. content audits, going through your content, seeing where the gaps are, understanding, and this is in documentation and in the UI, being able to kind of map out from a bigger picture, you know, what you have and what you don't. That always helps. Another word for that is kind of like on a more specific level is a gap analysis. Data and analytics, even if it's just Google Analytics, like that can give you tons of information. Now, it's not the full picture, but it is a good start to be able to start testing hypotheses. And there's a section in analytics and metrics in the course as well for documentation and how to kind of use your base level Google Analytics, what you get from there to help you make some more data-driven decisions. And there are also tools that help you choose words as well. And those are all in the document in the course as well. Competitor analysis, that's just a fancy word for saying like, what are our competitors doing? Like basically just going over there and saying, ooh, that's cool, I like that. That's a really good way to do that. That's provided me with a lot of really good insights, especially if it's a bigger competitor, because they probably have done a lot. They've had a lot of resources to put into the research, right? Design critique, just kind of like going over what I was saying before, being able to look at something and say, and look at your styles and being able to say like, hey, whenever we bold something within our documentation, it's actually bigger than the H2. Being able to note those things and being able to work with your UX designers and your product designers to make the tiny improvements over time. And then another way to do it is content-led design maps. And that's basically, so we talked about that task analysis before. And this is kind of, at least in the way that I use it, a next step for that. So like after you see the steps that a user are taking, plug in the holes. What information does the user need to succeed in that step? And map that alongside of that task analysis. And that can be what's already existing or what isn't in existence yet. So you can see a better picture of like, oh, we have this here, we don't have this, so we'll need this. And that can be across the product and in documentation to get a big picture view of it. So.
Awesome.
Yep.
Patrick, is there anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, sorry, I know that was fast and a lot of information.
No, not at all. No, I think those are all great examples, and I think the more resourceful I think you are in terms of getting ahead and providing examples. So on the previous slide, we gave the example of putting together mocks and wireframes and giving those to the design team and just getting involved in that early process is as important as possible, I think. So a lot of that will be in establishing and maintaining relationships with those teams. So there's going to have to be a lot of work done there as well. But yeah, as Dave says, the good news is that there are small steps that you can start taking straight away.
Yeah, awesome. So we have about 15 minutes left to go through some questions. So we might have to do lightning round because we have so many goodies.
And feel free, if we don't get to it, please email me, LinkedIn me, whatever. I would love to, I am completely up for having nerdy conversations about words.
Cool. So first question, what are the biggest challenges of tech writers trying to get into UX writing? How can we convince people we can do it?
Yeah, so I mean, a big thing is just the knowledge. So the hard part there is that like a lot of tech writers have already been doing it, right? Like before UX writing was a thing, there's been tons of people who have been looking at the UI saying like, this error message is pretty weird. Maybe we should better write this. So it depends on.
Oh my goodness. I think my fire alarm is going off.
Don't die, Katie. No.
Okay. I'll be right back. I'll be back. Let's see.
You're good. So generally, I would say, learn just keep up to date with, the industry. There's tons of really smart people putting out great articles. UX Writers Collective has tons of really good articles coming out. And then there are tons of courses around. Like UX Writer Collective obviously has some great courses. And then there's a course put out by design.gov.uk. The whole content arm did a really awesome course on content design there. There's plenty of resources to dive in and kind of to keep up to date with the best practices that are coming out. And that's, keeping up with the evolving industry. This is brand new. Like a lot of, well, I can't say that. It's coming into, it's maturing, and there's tons of thought process going on, and people are starting to kind of figure out what works and what doesn't. And that's just really good stuff to keep on. And then, just having a strong portfolio. And this is where, if you've already done it, being able to present that in a way that's, desirable to people who are hiring for UX roles. And it's just going to be a matter of, like, if you've done, error messages and stuff like that, just, build a portfolio based on that. And that's what you share.
Okay, I'm alive. I'm back. Sorry.
Good. No fire.
Oh, you're back. Great.
No fire. Actual fire drill. Sorry about that.
Well, we're glad you're okay. So that's good. I just wanted to, before we go on to that next slide, I just wanted to pick up on a question that's been asked in the chat. And that is, for technical writers who are already doing UX writing, what are the main benefits of taking the course? Mm-hmm. And I think just like with UX writing fundamentals, we actually get a lot of working UX writers taking that course. And I liken it to this. If you're a musician and you're playing a guitar, you might be a really great guitar player without knowing any of the music theory behind what you're doing. So you may be really proficient, but if you do learn theory, and if you do learn some of the theoretical knowledge behind what you're doing, it gives you more confidence, more resources, and more power in your abilities. So if you are a working hybrid technical UX writer, doing the course will give you, models and pathways and exercises and resources that you can bring into your job to start straight away. So if you are already sort of doing this work, there is still value for you in doing the course. So I just wanted to add that before we go on.
Yeah, and I would say too, Greg Silverman asked a really good question, and I can read that too. Like, seems like Dave's experience at working at the convergence of tech writing and UX is something that we typically see in smaller startup environments. And I would say yes. Like, the bigger the company is, the more resources they can have, and the more those resources can specialize, right? However, kind of going back to this idea of is there still knowledge to be gained by being able to see what Patrick was just saying, like this idea of fundamentals and being able to empathize across the board, even if you are in a specialized category. Like, I wouldn't say that anybody, there are technical writers who want to stay technical writers. There are UX writers who want to stay UX writers, and this course has something for both of those people. There's plenty of best practice content that I think can benefit wherever you are. So for technical, and specifically for technical writers. So I hope that answers that question too.
Cool. Are you ready for the next one?
Yeah, hit it.
Cool. So I'm a senior technical writer, 22 years experience. When I look for UX writing positions, will they consider me entry, mid, or senior level?
Yeah. Yes. It depends. I know that's a horrible answer, but it really just depends on kind of like your context and what your experience has been at this point. So, have you worked with UX teams? Have you done a lot of UI text? Have you done content analysis, like what has been your exposure to those sorts of things? And do you have a portfolio that shows that?
Mm-hmm.
I would say if you can write to what those people are looking for and provide them a strong portfolio of those examples, then, I mean, don't quote me on this, but then it would be kind of silly for them if they really saw the value that you brought and the clarity that you brought to the UI and the skill that you did there. It would be silly for them to say, yeah, just because you don't have a UX writer title, we're not going to consider you for a senior level position.
Yeah.
It just completely depends on what your exposure has been and you know, how you present that and what your experience has been.
Totally. Quick follow-up question in the chat. So somebody had asked, does this course focus on improving documentation or the UX writing? So I don't know, Patrick or Dave, if you want to take that one.
So it starts out, it goes through kind of some technical UX writing principles. And then from there, it goes into, here's how you can bring UX principles into your documentation. Mm-hmm. And it kind of goes over some of the things we've talked about so far: content audits, how you do some research, tone and voice and tone, and then visual hierarchy and some other stuff. And then from there, it says, okay, now that you can bring that into your documentation, how do you write and get the right message and think beyond documentation? And then it goes into the UX writing side where you're writing for components and writing for the UI. So it kind of goes over the whole gamut.
Yep.
Yeah, and just to clarify there, Dave, because you know, we have had a couple of questions about, oh, you know, should I do UX writing for technical writers, or should I do UX writing fundamentals? And what we would say is that if you're a technical writer and you still really enjoy being a technical writer and you still love doing documentation and you still want that to be a part of your role, but you want to add UX writing principles to your role, then the UX writing for technical writers course is for you. If you want to just do UX writing full time and you don't really want to do the technical writing side, then we'd say UX writing fundamentals is more the appropriate course.
Yep. Word.
Cool. Awesome. So this question, so what about other things that you have to be? Content managers, information architects, do we risk being spread too thin?
Yes. I mean, you always do, right? Like that's always a risk in any position. But you know, as everybody is aware, there is always tons of work to be done specifically around content. So, you know, the question really is like, in that, how do we stay healthy and how do we have boundaries? So it depends on your context and workload. One thing that I've always leaned back on is like outside of my daily duties. So whatever that is, whether that's keeping up with the release cycle, I have one or two things, you know, whether that's two small projects or one big project in a small project that I focus on. And then another good question is like, well, what matches company OKRs? Like, what is the company trying to achieve right now and how can I support that? Mm-hmm. And then one of the big things that has set me free a good bit to, keep sane is like either saying no, or if somebody says, I need you to do this, then say, okay, either I need to talk to my manager and ask her what thing I should not do in order to do this thing. Mm-hmm. Like that has helped me a lot, being able to say, I am limited. So where do I put my time and how do I prioritize that? It's just a matter of, you know, being able to say no and boundaries and all that jazz.
Awesome. So switching gears a little bit, do you find it helpful to give app developers a style guide? Is this same or different from the corporate style guide?
Yeah, so I think I understand this question, so I want to make some caveats to make sure that I'm hopefully answering the question correctly. So when we say style guide, I'm assuming here we're meaning like we're giving developers a specific content style guide. So like grammar, like those sorts of things, word choice, word list, voice tone, that. what I've found with giving developers a style guide is that they don't read it. And they typically have a hard time remembering to reference it. Now, also what I found is that it takes time for them to do that. So if it's a brand new, if it's like a brand new thing where suddenly they have to consider a style guide, it's going to take a lot of remembering to kind of you say like, hey, don't forget, there's a style guide. And that's another benefit to attending syncs, attending meetings, attending sprints, like sprint stand-ups, is being able to say, hey, I'm here. Does anybody have any style questions for anything they're working on? Like that has been really helpful too. And it's being a resource, being available. So, but again, it depends. It really depends on your structure. It depends on, you know, how, and even in the style guide, like, is it up to date? Like, are you sure that it's like, have you been maintaining it? Is it an old style guide that's still trying to be like still being updated? So, yeah, it just depends.
Cool. And I just want to make sure we're running a little tight on time, so we might go a few minutes over, but hopefully we can get to the rest of these. Certifications or skills that are attractive to employers. And Patrick, if you want to chime in on this one too, feel free.
Certification or skills. Yeah. So, I mean, again, it kind of goes back to, you know, where do you want to go? So, and do you want to continue, like, do you want to be a technical writer? So if you want to be a technical writer, you know, being able to show things that are relevant to technical writing. So whether if you're working on a platform that is using C++, or if you're working with, you know, JavaScript devs, or, you know, whatever that is, being able to show a certification in that language, or that you at least understand the basics. Like if you want to stay in that realm and you're thinking of just continuing to work on those sorts of products, then deepening your knowledge there is never going to hurt you. That's always going to be a strength. If you want to be a full stack writer, and if you want to kind of expand and be able to see, you know, bring those UX principles, you know, then this course is great, because you're bringing in those UX writing principles to technical writing, and you're finding a lot of you know, value in those things. And if you're looking kind of broadly, you're going to be able to say, hey, I have understanding of UX writing principles and how to write for components. That's going to really help too. Google Analytics, I mean, is always good, because there's always some sort of, like, you're going to be able to use that to say, like, I can parse data, I can understand, you know, what bounce rate and all that stuff is. Like, that always really helps. That's never going to hurt you. And same deal with web accessibility, like being able to say, like, I am confident and familiar with accessibility principles for the web. Like, that's always really needed as well, especially in documentation. So I would say, you know, those sorts of things are always going to be helpful to you.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And then I'd also add, there can be an assumption sometimes that even technical, despite the name, that technical writers sometimes lack detailed knowledge of the systems and tech that's underpinning a particular product. So I would say anything, look, there are a million different languages that you could look at, but I think, you know, starting with something like, you know, some basic C, and then even, you know, JavaScript, even just at a basic level, will show employers that you have the ability to understand, even at a rudimentary level, how these languages work and how to think in that mindset.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great. So an industry question: where do you see the industry going? What new methods add the most value to clients using our docs? And I also see in the chat some people are talking about, like, orgs are already moving in this direction, or how you know, what is our field navigating? Why are UX writers and technical writers traditionally seen as separate roles? So just more on, like, the industry trends.
Yeah, it's a good, I mean, they're all good questions, right? So, you know, I think there's still a lot of kind of soul searching to be done about those exact questions. But I do think that, like, as time goes on, you know, the UX writing side, the UX principles are going to start to permeate within the technical writing. And we're going to start to see more of those data-driven content design sorts of research principles affecting technical writing and technical writers as we go. And one thing that I think is going to start happening is we're going to start seeing what does it mean for in-app help and docs to be kind of the same thing. And it's going to be merged in really innovative ways. I mean, Twilio is doing this a good bit. I mean, we saw earlier that they have a code editor right within their docs. They also have like a game. I can't remember what it is, but like they have a game that helps you learn how to use their product and kind of introduce you to code. And then another one is Postman. They have, you know, this learning center within their product where you can learn sort of tracks. It's like modules. So I think that's for more technical products. I think that's going to start becoming more and more the norm, where docs and in-app help are kind of like almost the same thing. And then kind of like what I said earlier, I really do think that the UX writing is going to start, at least the principles behind it is going to start being the baseline for how to design content for technical users in documentation. So
awesome. Yeah, I just want to be cognizant of time. For any questions we didn't get to, feel free to email us, info@uxwriterscollective.com, and we'll follow up with you there as well. But again, to clarify the difference between the two courses, UX Writing Fundamentals is for those new to working with design teams looking for, you know, making that switch to UX writing full time. UX Writing for Technical Writers will really help you power up your docs and also add that skill set to your day-to-day. So apologies, we didn't have time to get to the open Q&A, but we'll be sure to hang out again soon. And I know y'all were waiting for this, so you can use code TechUX20 if you're interested in signing up for the course, and that won't expire anytime soon. So think about it. If you have any questions, again, you can email us. It's on the screen, info@uxwriterscollective.com, and we'll be happy to answer any more questions. So thanks again. I'm sorry about the fire. Literally, we're on fire.
Good.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, everyone. And stay tuned for an email follow-up. And thank you, Dave and Patrick, for your time, as always.
Thank you.
Cool. All right.
Great.
Bye, everyone.